Hi, I am Cristiano Torales, and I will present the results of a study that is part of my doctoral thesis that I am developing at the University of Coimbra, supervised by Professor Anabela Ribeiro. This study is an expert survey to assess the relevance and valence of walkability indicators. The indicator approach is a common method in walkability studies. However, this approach presents some challenges, one of them being the great quantity and variety of indicators used in studies found in the literature. This variety may be justified by the need to represent different attributes of the urban space or different measurement methods for similar attributes. On the other hand, few urban planning studies were found dedicated to assessing the valence of the indicators, that is, evaluated the affective perception in which people perceive these indicators, positively, with pleasure, or negatively, with avoidance. Therefore, the present study aimed to attack these two gaps. One, the exhaustive number of indicators, based on the search for a more concise set through the assessment of international consensus about the relevance. And two, the few studies about valences, based on the assessment of consensus about them. In walkability studies, it's commonly cited as challenging the characteristic complexity of social phenomena. That is, the subjectivity of pedestrians' behavior, the differences in types of people, and the differences between local contexts. Searching for a pattern based on similarities is criticized because it is a generalist approach that ignores diversities and specificities. However, it is possible to see that some indicators are repeated in different studies, regardless of the contexts. At the same time, there are serious studies that propose to demonstrate this possibility of an international standard, as the case of MAPS Global, which has been tested in different case studies. This divergence between the criticism of the generalist approach and the proposal of an international standard suggests a question that is behind this study. Is walkability a highly contextual phenomenon? This study method followed 6 steps. The step 1, the literature review, had 27 different studies in which 769 indicators were found. This review could have been expanded, but it was chosen to finish with a large number of indicators. With a redundancy pre-assessment, this list was reduced to 227 indicators. That is, indicators were grouped if they represent the same attribute, even if there was a different name or a measurement method. We have added 2 other indicators that represent more recent attributes to verify their relevance with the experts. There is ride sharing or carpooling service availability and Wi-Fi network availability. Then the questionnaire was prepared on the Google Form platform. The first version of the questionnaire was tested through cognitive interviews with a small expert group, which helped to evaluate redundancy and critical unintelligibilities. This step reduced the list to 104 indicators, which were taken to the final version of the online questionnaire. Then the experts were selected following the idea of a continuum, that is, not only the authors of publications on the team, but also teams from universities, planning agencies, and other related organizations. The questionnaire was spread via email, and the answers were evaluated for the entire set of respondents, but also disaggregated according to the most used transport mode by the experts, the social groups considered the most vulnerable ones, women, elderly, and disabled specialists, and local contexts, grouped according to continents. For the whole set of experts and for each disaggregation, the consensus was verified according to the low measure, which considers high consensus when more than 70% of answers are in one category or more than 80% in two contiguous categories. Here is the example of the form interface containing the ethical consent requirements, then the section with questions about the expert profile, which facilitated the disaggregation of answers. Also, the main section with the indicators assessment, with one question about relevance and another about valence, both with the option of uncertainty. It's important to highlight that experts were asked to evaluate the indicators according to a perspective of model integration and social inclusion. As I stated before, the literature review resulted in a large Excel file with a list of 769 indicators. With pre-assessment of redundancy, it was possible to verify the most frequent attributes. For example, the commercial density and the existence of obstacles that appeared 23 times. The expert survey had 255 answers, 221 valid from 72 different countries. To evaluate the relevance, were verified the high consensus, more than 70% of responses to relevance level 5, or high contiguous consensus, more than 80% of responses in level 4 and 5. 15 indicators showed this high consensus to the broad set of respondents and also for all disaggregations. 88 resulted in high contiguous consensus in at least one disaggregation, and 36 in high consensus only at level 5 for at least one disaggregation. Considering the most present indicators in the literature review, those with more than 20 mentions, here in red, were not consensual in some contexts, but some others with less than 20 mentions, but more than 15, reached consensuality in all groups. Returning to the question, is walkability a highly consensual contextual phenomenon? Based on this international questionnaire with 221 experts, the answer is no, but it may also be yes. That is, some indicators show the strong consensuality, regardless of the context or social group. But others reached more specific relevance to just a few groups. Considering the valences, there was greater consistency among the answers of the different groups, with few disagreements. For example, in the two images in the lower right corner, it's observable the green repeats in almost all columns that represents the disaggregated groups with high consensus for positive valence, that is, tending to improve walkability. In purple, for negative valence, that is, tend to worse walking. In blue, for uncertainties, and in blank are those without consensus. The uncertainties reveal disagreements and can be of two types. Structural, which was evaluated from the question about relevance, In this case, the average uncertainty was low at 3.1%, but some indicators had more significant uncertainties. Parametric uncertainties were evaluated from the question about valence and had a slightly higher average of 19.1%. Also, some indicators resulted in uncertainties greater than average. 40 of the 104 indicators did not achieve consensus, suggesting that the common sense is not enough to decide whether an indicator positively or negatively influences the urban environment. As a final result of a concise set of indicators that considers the specificities of different social groups in local contexts, 36 indicators had a high consensus for a highest relevance in at least one of the groups, also as the relative respective valences. Only one of them had uncertainty in valence. This study is not exempt from limitations. For example, it covered only a small part of the literature. It also had a low response rate with 2.1%, while other studies point to an average of 10 to 30%. On the other hand, the 221 answers exceeded the number of respondents for most questionnaires in the area. A more significant portion of the experts' answers came from Brazil and Portugal, in Latin America and Europe. However, the impact of this imbalance was low. Few indicators reveal different consensus when comparing the results without these two countries, and these differences were always close to consensuality threshold. Some contributions are the uncertainties and the consensual differences, which points to the need for further studies. In addition, the disaggregations helped reduce the generalization criticized in other studies. Finally, the next steps is to apply this concise set in a case study and conduct a consultation with regular people to determine the weights for the indicators. Here are some references, and thank you for your attention.